Life can be fast-paced, strenuous, and flat-out overwhelming. Life transitions and taboo topics can make it hard to catch your breath. Welcome to Breathe, a podcast that enables you to slow down, get your bearings, and engage in real conversations where no topic is off limits. Breathe is presented by Breath of Life, hosted by David Person and speaker-director Pastor Debleaire Snell.
Welcome to Breathe. I'm David Person, and it's another Monday with my brothers, Pastor Debleaire Snell.
Hey.
Speaker-director of Breath of Life, senior pastor of the Oakwood University Church, and Pastor Kirk Nugent, media pastor at Oakwood and the media guru here at Breath of Life.
Yeah, it's a good Monday. It's a good Monday.
Yeah, it's another warm July Monday.
That's right.
And so this is exciting, and I'm glad to be with you guys.
Absolutely.
And with the Breathe family.
Yeah,
that's right.
Breathe
That's
fam.
right.
Breathe fam.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. This is one here, this topic. So we are again, this is under the rubric, the umbrella, the general overarching theme of is it possible?
Is it possible?
Yeah.
And we're looking
Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible.
we're looking at the viability of the claims and practices of Jesus. Last episode we talked about peace.
Yeah.
This cuts close to home. I think for all of us.
Yeah.
Because all of us have people in our lives.
Yeah.
Or on the periphery of our lives who could be fairly characterized as enemies.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
keep
Very
it
much.
real.
Very much.
Keep it real.
Yeah.
Some of them are in our families.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them
Yep.
are in our churches or our communities or at work.
Yep.
You know, so Jesus said to love your enemies.
He said, love your enemies.
He said love them.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
That's
this
the
is
counsel.
what he said in Matthew chapter 5. So,
Ain't gonna be like, and he just lays it out. Bless those who curse you, and,
yes.
and pray for those who despitefully use you.
Mercy.
I mean, it's just like, wow. And then it's just kind of like, I remember, you know, when we talked about last time, I remember kind of for the first, I don't know, a good portion of my Christian journey, I was like, well, those are kind of the Jesus rules.
Right. Right.
That kind of is just for him. Yeah, I don't know that
Applies
has
to-
implication for
yeah.
my life. Yeah. So.
Oh man, you know, and when I look at it, I immediately think of, you know, some really tough situations.
Yeah.
Where somebody just threw you under the bus.
Yeah.
And you really wonder to yourself, man, am I really being admonished to love them?
This person. Yeah.
Like that person? Because I think when we think of it in the abstract, it's something that we can just say. It's almost like a moniker, you know, just kind of put it out there. Love your enemies. But when we put it in practical terms, you know, for the listener that's out there, you know, that for the viewer, the listener who's hanging with us today, and you think about that person that did that thing,
The person who hurt your child.
Yeah.
The person who, you know, who cheated with your spouse or something, or your ex-spouse.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the person
You
who
said it.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, that's when you start.
Yeah.
The person who caused you to lose your job maybe because they did something that was fraudulent or
They sabotage.
There you go.
sabotage your
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
You know, you're supposed to love that person.
Yeah.
That's the sense. I just wanted to make sure we set that stage.
No, I'm
because
glad
I
you
wanted
did
to
that.
Plug into that.
Because some people kind of, they put the wrong people in the enemy category.
They do.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They just, all right, this person just gets on my nerves.
nerves.
They
They're an enemy.
rub me the wrong way.
Yeah.
They're just not my type of person. That's not really an enemy.
No.
What you guys described, that's enemy
Yeah.
category.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. And I believe that's what Jesus was referring to when he said it. He was referring to this particular category. These are enemies.
Yeah, so when you look at Matthew
Yeah.
5:43 through 48, it's like, bless those who curse you. Pray for those who despitefully use you.
That's
he
it
talks
right
about
there.
what to do with those who lie upon you and slander you. And so, you know, their actions seem to have a certain intentionality to them.
Yeah,
and I think that's the group that he says, man, love that group. And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, jump in.
Well, I was going to say, you know, and to that, Pastor, you know, we also, I think we're acculturated to think about love as almost a transactional way. Like if I love you, then the expectation is that you're going to
love me back.
reciprocate.
Yeah, that's
right?
true. Yeah.
So what do you do? How do you love
That's
in a
good,
situation where you know there's not going to be reciprocation?
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a
So
question.
I do think a big part of this conversation. So like because like people are like, oh well, only Jesus can love like that. Well, we are Christians. We bear His name. We are followers of Jesus. So we're called to do what He does. And then this thing that I think I really want our audience to really digest. When He talks about loving your enemies, He does not put that out as a recommendation. It's not a suggestion.
Right.
He puts it in the context of a command. And so I think to your point, it actually reshapes the way that we see love. Because I think we think love is going to always have a warm feeling attached to it. I think we think that it has to be automatic or involuntary, where love is very much a decision.
Decision. That's the
And
term. Yeah.
It is a decision in many instances against my feelings. It will at times feel counterintuitive. But I do think that until I begin to see love as a choice that I make even against my feelings or my perceived interests at that time, this will always feel impossible or conceptual or fictional if you only see love as the warm, fuzzy, involuntary reaction to somebody who is showing kindness or love toward me. Because real love is going to be generated, and Jesus modeled it even to those who do not respond in kind.
It's a radical. It's radical. It's something that the world has not seen and is not used to.
Yep.
And it is of a nature that is so rare that Jesus even says, by this all men will know that you are my people.
That's
because of the love you have.
That's the metric.
That's it.
That's the metric.
And it isn't love you have one for another with your crew. It's the love you have for those who you shouldn't love. And I think there's something radical that we also tap into when we're able to harness, when we make the decision, I love that, to love the person who is unlovable. Yeah.
I think about Dr. King. He has this famous sermon called "Loving Your Enemies," and he talks about seeing the humanity in your enemies as being one way that you can help to cultivate that love.
Right.
And he talks about also reconciling ourselves to the fact that in all of us there is some good and there is some bad.
Yeah.
And so when we understand that sort of complexity, and he feels in the sermon he expresses that it makes it easier, I guess, to move into the space that we're talking about.
Sure.
But as I was reading that sermon once, I had to stop and think. Now, this is the man whose house was bombed.
Talk about it.
This is the man who was stabbed by a woman. This is the man who was put in jail. This was the man who ultimately was assassinated. And who knew that he was going to die at somebody else's hands. Not a natural death.
Surely.
And yet he was able to preach this sermon, and not just preach it, but I think he came as close, perhaps as certainly in my lifetime, as I've seen anybody could come to really living out what Jesus was talking
Certainly,
about.
as he studied and modeled those principles of Jesus and Gandhi as a little bit more of a contemporary.
Yes.
I think, so because Jesus talked about, even as he's being crucified, he's like, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Wow. I think that to that point, when he says they know not, no, they know the action they're calling for. They know what they're executing. But I think Jesus is saying, I don't think they know what's driving them. They don't know what's controlling them. They don't know and I think that that's true when you talk about looking at, a person's humanity. What can cause a person to have that much vitriol inside of them? What causes somebody to act out in such a way? What causes somebody, to be so dark in soul that I'll take a machine gun and just start shooting up a public place?
Wow.
Like, and it's, at the end of the day, I still believe in the law so that there's a deterrent from those kind of behaviors. But I do think that at the end of the day, you realize, and to a certain extent, you begin to pity certain people that, man, your life is that small, or you lack such value, or that you can have that kind of hate inside of you, or that you're operating in that much ignorance. There is a certain point of you that's just like, man, I feel sorry that you have to live in a world
Yeah.
with that much suspicion, paranoia, unrest, that you feel like you have to act out in that way.
Yeah. It's the human condition. These are symptoms of the human condition.
Yeah.
Which only has one cure, and that's will be given when Jesus comes again. But as we look at one another now, in the here and the now, one of the weapons we have, one of the tools we have in our arsenal to be able to show that love is to be able to see the humanity.
Yep.
To see them through the lens of the condition, as opposed to they knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
And the person that hurt you, it was intentional.
Yeah.
They knew it would hurt you. That's why they did it.
Yep.
And there's still yet something deeper behind that.
Behind it, yeah.
And tapping into that does give us some capacity
Yeah.
to look beyond and see them for the person that God still sent his son to die for.
Yeah.
Yes,
So they're both psychological things that drive a person's actions. There are social or cultural things that drive a person's actions. I do think that they're spiritual. They're just darkness, evil
Absolutely. Yes.
that drive. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, you're able to not excuse their behaviors, but you kind of you look at it from a different vantage point. And that's where some of the pity kind of comes in. You're like, okay, and so to respond in kind brings about no resolution.
Yeah.
I've got to then respond in love. Now it's funny because like now I'm wrestling with this idea of Jesus commanding us to love our enemies, right? So one of the things I hold as a conviction is that everything God commands is for my good. It's for my good. And
This is the whole thing.
And see, it changed the way I see this whole thing with love. So, like, for instance, let's just say a rattlesnake.
Oh,
I know somehow we keep wondering. I keep wondering. It's summertime.
Back to rattlesnake.
And I saw one. Thankfully, it was. Well, I shouldn't say thankfully. It's one of God's creatures.
Yeah.
But it was ran over by a car. So it's in my subconscious. But so a rattlesnake has a construct that allows it to house poison.
Yeah.
And give it to an enemy without it affecting him.
Mercy.
We do not have that construct. So I cannot poison you with hate without it poisoning or killing me.
Mercy.
You know what I'm saying? So it's so me responding to you in kind.
wow.
It harms me
That's good.
in the process.
Yeah, that's good.
Which is why I'm now understanding. And it's so funny because the Bible doesn't always give us kind of some of the emotional and psychological ramifications of certain things that Jesus said. But we are actually not designed to be repositories of poison, hate, darkness, because the only way I can get back at you is to kind of harm myself in the process. And so, like, okay, if I'm responded, somebody gives me hate or trauma or pain, the antidote for that, the vaccine, is love.
Is love.
And the only way I can be healed is to kind of operate, kind of within that rubric or construct of love. But if I embrace the poison, man, I go down with the person that I'm trying to retaliate against or harm.
Wow.
Wow.
And the component that you touched on there where you said that God is working these things for my good.
My good, yeah.
Yeah. That's heavy.
Yeah.
That's heavy because
this is for the benefit of the offended, wounded partner.
Wow.
Because even Paul talks about how you don't want to let the root of bitterness stain your soul.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, at the end of the day, man, if bitterness gets in you and it metastasizes, I don't know if you ever seen somebody where like they've dealt with a number of life's inequities, and they started out maybe not necessarily young, but just a vibrant. You saw a light in their eyes, a joyfulness, a cheerfulness, a willingness to give, and you see them go through life, and they are a different person.
Yeah.
Beat down.
The light, that light is gone.
Yeah.
There's cynicism, there's a jadedness, and you're just kind of like, wow, I don't want to, because I mean, at the end of the day, life, this is one statement of what makes life fair is that it's unfair to everybody. We're going to go through life's inequities, injustices. All that's going to really happen, Dave, is it's going to hit some earlier in life.
Yeah.
It's going to hit some in the middle of life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but everybody's going to run through the same gamut. You're going loss,
Yep.
injustice, exclusion. That's a part of everybody's journey. It's just going to happen to you at different points in life. And at the end of the day, you got to be careful to not let life shape you in its image. We got to remain in the image of God and in his character and his love.
Wow. So again, I think almost like we talked about in the last episode, circumstances are going to be what they are.
They are going to be what they are.
And what we learn from Scripture and from experience is that even though life has beautiful high moments where it just seems like everything is clicking on track, going right, believe me, there's going to come a time when things are not going to be clicking. It's just it's just what happens.
Right.
We call it the vicissitudes of life.
Yep.
Up and down.
Yeah.
In and out.
Yeah.
You know, tough and then sometimes really beautiful.
Yeah.
But it's life. And so the challenge for us is to find that, whether you're talking about, as we were in the previous episode, finding peace in the middle of all that, or as it relates to our relationships with other people, finding that love space where we can love regardless of what people are saying or doing, or whether or not they're reciprocating.
You know, and one of the things is I'm looking at certain things, and this is kind of a really macro, broad brush with certain movements. The Christian movement and the African American movement here in the United States. You know, the early Christian church came under heavy persecution. Christians at that point, you know, in Judaism, Rome, you know, Hellenistic period, they're the minorities. Like, you know, there are movements to wipe it from the face of the earth.
Right.
But they did not respond with weapons and fights and swords. But, you know, love was their strategy, you know, not in all facets, not perfectly, but that was what drove their behavior. And that's what really allowed them to spread. That's actually the power that actually converted enemies to the faith and allowed what was kind of started out as a local Jerusalem sect to become a worldwide phenomenon. You know, even when you look at our experience in this country, you know, at the end of the day, we're roughly going to be somewhere between, you know, 11 to 13, 15% of the population. Like, there's no way to fight our way.
Right.
That's a losing battle. You know, when you look at people that take arms, like, that's a losing strategy.
Yeah.
Like, so when we look at Dr. King, like, the advances that we have made as a community, they were not through bloody revolution.
Come on.
They were not through a bloody coup. It was through nonviolent, Jesus-based, imperfectly executed principles that allowed us to even be able to have the standing in this country that we have, especially as it relates to kind of where it was. So I just think that, man, love is a winning strategy. Now, the one thing about it is that it doesn't create immediate results. But I think that I think it's interpersonal, you know, so as a leader, you know, there's just times where people are just not feeling you. They just, for whatever reason, they see in you this symbol of something that is harmful to them inside. And generally my strategy is like, okay, I could just ice you. I could just cut you off, could just avoid space. But my general principle, and I ain't gonna lie, it's been a winning strategy in 22 years of ministry, is just to kind of to make the decision to kind of love on that person. And I've seen God really, in probably 95% of those instances, reverse it and turn it and shift it. Because I can go tit for tat. You know, you can try to get in the mud. You can try to prove yourself right. But at the end of the day, the only thing that has helped bring about resolution or reconciliation in all of those instances is just to show the love of God. And I've not always wanted to do that. You know what I'm saying? But it has been the most helpful, beneficial.
Well, you know, I was going to say, I think
good.
To your point, love is the only, it's the strongest force, I think, in the universe. It's the only thing that changes hearts and minds. Wars don't do that.
Wars don't do anything.
Fights don't do that.
They don't.
You know, reciprocating hate with hate doesn't do it. But if you love somebody. So John Lewis, the late, great Congressman John Lewis, told this story once to me, and then I've also heard him tell it to others, about how he was in his office one day in Washington, and these two men came into his office, an older white man and a younger white man. The older white man begins to say to him, look, wanted to meet you because I was on the Edmund Pettis Bridge that day in 1965 when you got your head bashed in.
Yeah.
And he was there because he was part of the law enforcement cadre. I don't know exactly which one he was with. But he was an active participant on the other side in trying to suppress the peaceful, nonviolent resistance of SNCC and the others, the other civil rights groups.
Right.
And he said, I wanted to say to you that I'm sorry.
Wow. Wow.
I'm sorry for the role I played and for what happened to you.
Wow.
John Lewis said that man, that old white man, then started crying.
Wow.
John Lewis was so moved, he started crying.
Yeah.
The son or grandson, he starts crying. So they're all just kind of standing there in his office, hugging each other and crying. And what that said to me, and I think the purpose of his telling that story, Congressman Lewis telling that story, is that if instead of nonviolent, love-based resistance, they had taken up arms.
Right, yeah.
They had been on that bridge with baseball bats and chains or guns or whatever.
It would never.
That man never would have been standing in his office.
Standing in his office, Wow.
Love did that.
Love has converting power. And I think the thing is, and I want to say this to maybe there's a brother listening, or maybe there's just somebody who's just really grieved by somebody. And to them, this idea, this conversation around love, that's soft.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But no. It doesn't take very much to react or respond in kind. Like the most hardcore gangster move on this planet is to love those who are not, in your estimation, deserving or worthy of it.
Right.
It requires decision. It is discipline. It is a patient, to throw a punch, to say a nasty word, to fire off a tweet. Like that's the soft thing to do. That's the easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Like this is really what requires kind of a different level of maturity. And I think that we got to reshape that narrative, like that to be hostile to respond in kind. That's the hardcore gangster. No, the thug thing to do is to really say, like, all right, I'm going to love you in a way without, as you said earlier, expectation of reciprocation. But because I'm being moved and fueled by a different principle and a different priority.
So how do we get to that place? I think that's we're talking about the benefits and how it can transform situations. But how do you get to the place where you are able to move beyond your own natural feelings of wanting to retaliate to saying, no, I'm going to respond, not retaliate, but respond with love. How do we get there?
So number one, this is key. You can't give what you don't have. That's the bottom line. So like this idea of love, like as just, because there's a difference between just, all right, civility. And love. Civility just means I'm going to kind of operate within the bounds of the law. And civility is kind of consequence averse. Like I don't want to go to jail. You know what I'm saying, right? For going and burning down my neighbor's property. That kind of
I'm
thing,
not going
right?
to do that.
But I think at the end of the day, like I think so. 1 John says God is love. God is not loving. Love is not one of his traits. It's not one of his characteristics.
There it is.
He is, all love is generated in him. He is the source of it. And I think that as I am connected to that source, I then become a conduit of God's love in the world.
Well
done.
So
Well
I
said.
think that chief thing is connection to source. Because like, a lot of times we just talk about, I just I ain't got the love to give, That's just, it's an announcement I'm not connected to the source.
Really it is. That's
So
what
like
it is.
a water hose does not produce water.
No.
It just carries it. It's a funnel through which that spigot kind of flows out to the world. And so I just think at the end of the day, I got to be a water hose connected to this endless supply
of love
in the Lord Jesus Christ. And but then the book of Proverbs talks about how he who rules his spirit is mightier than he who takes the city. So like at the end of the day, we do have to abide in principle. Like love is a principle, it's a decision more than it is an emotion, a feeling, or a reaction. Like at the end of the day, I hardly just wake up with butterflies in my stomach. Like I just want to love everybody. I just that person said something mean to me. And I just really feel like I just really feel like blessing them. You know what I'm saying? Like no, I gotta. I wonder if that's what somebody thought. Like,
that's not it. That's not it.
There have to be a management of soul, spirit, and reactions.
Yeah.
Like there's even people think like the real thing is to say what's on your mind. Like, no, I'm a truthful person. I don't say everything that's on my mind. That's not helpful to me. And it wouldn't be beneficial to any relationship that I value or care for. So I do think that there's got to be emotional, verbal filters and a ruling of self. Because again, I don't think we are supposed to be emotionless, but I don't think we should be emotion-led. I think if you're emotion-led, your life is going to be filled with a lot of sorrows and defeats along the way.
Yeah, no, that's gold. I think there's and your capacity. See, the whole connection piece. I think that's critical. Recognizing that God is love, He is the source, and so our capacity to be a conduit of love comes from the time that we've spent with Him. Comes from the time that we've spent in His Word. It comes from our time, kind of just having Him and His likeness imputed to us.
Yeah.
And so there is almost like a muscle that you're growing.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be able to do this enemy type love right at the beginning, or maybe just not those grievous offenses.
Yeah, sure.
But as you practice in some of the smaller pieces, as you practice in some of the smaller grievances, if you will, the guy who cut you off.
Yeah.
And you're like, and one of the things I do is I see myself in that. He's like, they're probably in a rush. I've been there. Sometimes I didn't see the car in the other lane, and you hear the horn honk, and you swerve back. And sometimes you find yourself, and you put yourself in those shoes. You're giving yourself, you're training that muscle. You're allowing God to really show you what loving the enemy looks like, even though that may not be a full enemy just yet. But you're working up to those larger ones. I think a lot of times we look at it from the perspective, okay, God's going to share with me the way to love, and it's going to be this overnight thing that the guy who was literally trying to murder me yesterday, I'm just going to walk up and give him a hug. I feel like there's going to be this gradual process that you will go through to get to a place where this becomes viable. This becomes your lived experience where you can honestly, with genuine nature of heart, say, I am not harboring ill will toward you. And if we understand the definition of love, true definition of love, that's what I'm going to give you.
Yeah. And I do think, I do want to go back to that result thing a little bit. I just think it's just operating, because really the opposite of love is hate or bitterness or whatever. I just think you have to kind of look at, is that serving me better?
Wow.
Than showing love to that person? Like, is that changing me? Is that to harbor that hate or anger or that bitterness? What is it causing to metastasize inside of me? And so I do think that, man, going back to kind of what we talked about earlier, when Christ commands us to love, that's because it is going to be a greater blessing for you than to show love and to generate love than to generate the counterpart of that. Living in anger and hate and fear, it is there is no healing anywhere in there. There is no resolve. There is no...
It's that poison piece.
Good outcome for storing all of that inside of you.
Mercy.
So I just think, even it sounds crazy, even in your own self-interest, it's just to adopt the formula of Jesus Christ. It's going to bring a greater happiness, joy, and sense of solace to your own life.
I think a word that you used that was really even more than appropriate, I almost think it was prescient. You used the word metastasi.
Ah, that's good.
Yeah.
Hate is like a cancer.
It's a cancer.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's destroying you spiritually.
Yeah.
And I think even physically.
Physically,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
On the inside.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And so, like, nobody
Wow.
fights to keep cancer. You know what I'm saying? You want
Yeah.
you want to remove it, or,
In whatever way
right.
you can.
That's
And so,
right.
like, kind
Yeah.
of hold on to it. It's like, oh man, let
Give
me
me
keep my
my
cancer.
cancer.
You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
I
Like, yeah, that's kind of what it is. And so, what we're saying, I do want to be clear. We're not saying this is easy. We're not saying this is simple.
No.
Even the idea of love, there are no practical steps to this. These are very mature, deep spiritual aims that you have to apply yourself to it one day at a time, dying daily, embracing the virtues and the teachings of Jesus Christ in your life, and then just kind of realizing that you are able to experience much greater, happier, joyful outcomes when you choose love over hate any day of the week.
Amen.
Not easy, but definitely worth it.
Worth it.
Definitely worth
Yeah.
it.
I love it. This has been, as we said in the beginning, this would be a challenging conversation, but I think it's been rich. I think it's been real.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I hope that our viewers and our listeners have gained some benefit from listening, from eavesdropping on this,
There you go.
this conversation today with Pastors Debleaire Snell and Kirk Nugent.
Indeed.
God bless you. And when life gets tough, when you want to, when you're tempted to hate or to reciprocate in a way that reflects negativity, stop, pray, and breathe.
Breathe is produced by David Person for Breath of Life. Executive producer is Debleaire Snell, and sound engineer is Kirk Nugent. Audio episodes of Breathe can be found on Apple, Spotify, or Google Podcast platforms. For video episodes and extra content, check out the Breath of Life YouTube channel. Breath of Life is faith-based content, resources, and programs from a contemporary urban perspective for those looking for hope and guidance. We believe that every breath we take is a testimony that God is consistent, that He loves us, and has a plan for our lives.